The stories I am about to share are personal experiences that had occurred with me in my life. They are recounted to the best of my ability, especially considering many happened more than 10 years ago, and also when I was quite young. A couple of the stories have been narrated on this channel before in a few other videos. I decided to go back and refine these stories as well, and add more details within. Hope you enjoy them, and thank you. This is a retelling of an experience or encounter a friend of mine had many years ago. First, let's give a little background to this. Years ago, when I was between 18 to 20 years old, I was in a little metal band with 4 others, and this incident happened to our bass player in his home, which was also where we would gather for practice. However, it in a strange way involved all of us. Again, this is his telling of the incident. Also, this was in South Texas around December time frame. It happened sometime late at night, according to him. It started between 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. He woke up randomly and just felt compelled to look out his window. He was sleeping on the living room couch that night. When he looked, he saw a shadowy figure crossing his yard. He said it looked like it was moving quite erratically. His example was like how the doctor moved around in the remake of House on Haunted Hill. Thinking he was just tired and half awake, he thought nothing of it and assumed it was just one of the neighbors, as they would often do that, and he would go back to sleep. Shortly after that, he woke up with this feeling like someone holding him down and making it hard for him to breathe, which sure sounds like sleep paralysis, except he claimed the whole time he could hear chanting and whispering around him, and no one was in the room with him. It eventually stopped abruptly after a minute or two. He sat up confused, terrified, got a drink of water, and tried to go back to sleep, which happened eventually. Shortly after that, it all happened again. Same feeling, same chanting and whispering. He always said he never knew or could understand exactly what was being chanted and whispered. Regardless, this episode ended, and he once again was scared and confused. He chalked this up to maybe he was just having a bad dream, and managed to go back to sleep again. And then it all happened once more. He woke up like something was holding him down and making it hard to breathe, and the chanting and whispering all around him. Though this time something new happened. He said he looked over next to him on the couch, and standing in front of the Christmas tree was a short, 4-foot-tall shadowy figure that appeared to be cackling at him, though it wasn't making any other noise. And this went on for what he said felt like forever, and this time, when it stopped, he gave up on sleeping and went to his bedroom and played with his bass guitar for the rest of the night. For the remainder of the night, coming from the direction of his sister's room, he would hear 2 knocks every couple of minutes. He didn't go back to sleep until the next night due to this. When the band and I gathered the next day for practice, he told us what happened, and of course we all laughed and said he was full of it. Then he showed us that in his yard he found what looked like footsteps tracked through his yard all the way to his front door. The steps were just that, footsteps, made from shoes but no defining features to them. No imprint of the bottom of the shoe, just plain. And then when he told around what time this started happening, and that it was about 3 a.m. when this last attack happened, we all froze because of what we realized we had been doing that night. Our singer woke up randomly and was praying. Our lead guitarist woke up and just could not go back to sleep, feeling like something was wrong and off. And I, for no reason, woke up, turned on my lamp, and just started reading the Bible. We all realized that all of us at the same time he was experiencing this incident had gotten up at 3 a.m. and either prayed, read a Bible, or felt a sense of dread. Our drummer wasn't there at the time. He told us this, and he never said if he did anything that night as well. But The story had him quite spooked. This story has stuck with me for many years, and I still have no way of explaining it, but I figured you all would like to hear it. My buddy never had another experience like this again. When I left the military and secured a new job, I had to move closer to DC. I lived there alone for a year until my wife had finished her military service and was able to move her and the kids out to where I was living. When the time came, we settled on renting a small 3-bedroom townhouse. We weren't expecting to be there long, as my goal was to leave Virginia and get a job elsewhere. As always with life, nothing stays as planned. We ended up living in that house for 7 years, until we settled on just buying a home of our own. And those 7 years were filled with some strange occurrences in the house. It all started with a discussion my oldest son would have with his mother and I about his room at night. He had the second largest bedroom, and at the time he was 4 and our daughter was 3. Our son would tell us how a little boy would come to him in his room at night and talk to him. He said he would talk about how he had to hide from the bad man because he would kill him if he found him. We were confused, but figured maybe he was just having some weird dreams. This went on for a couple years, though, until he started to get closer to 11, when he ended up having to move rooms. We decided because our youngest daughter is getting older, she needed a bigger room, so the wife and I moved our room into the basement and moved our son into our old room and moved our daughter to his old room. And then it started again, except with our daughter. She started to tell us about how she would see this little boy, and unlike my son, it was scaring her. She would often sleep on the couch in the living room, and this is where her odd habit of needing to sleep with the lights and the TV on started as well. This isn't where it all ended, though. There was an occasion where I was taking a nap on the couch in the living room, and the wife was lying opposite of me on the couch, reading a book. Then she saw something. She looks up with her skin pale and asks if I saw what she saw. I didn't, and asked what did she see. She said she'd seen what looked like a very short person walk by the couch right behind where I was laying. Whatever, or whoever it was gone. Then I turned around and, well, she even saw this thing disappear right in front of her. Needless to say, this terrified her a little. My wife has always been a bit more sensitive to paranormal things, so she always did see more than I ever did. On another day, I was at work and the kids were at school. She told me she was lying on the couch and could see right up the stairs to the first landing, and a little boy in very old clothing was actually sitting on the stairs. She explained that she had asked the boy what his name was and how old he was, and even invited him to sit on the couch with her if he was lonely. She said there was not a single answer and the boy just stayed where he was. Now, I never witnessed or really saw anything happen, but I have had my own experiences as well with this boy. Back before the rooms were moved around, there were many times when the wife and kids would go to see her mother, and I would be home alone for weeks at a time. No matter what I did, you always felt like somebody was sitting with you or watching you. I had a problem with having to sleep in the dark in the home when everyone was gone. I used to sleep in our bedroom when it was upstairs, but I couldn't anymore, as every time I did, there always seemed to be someone in the room with me, or felt like they were standing in the hallway watching me. Now, shortly before we ended up moving, there was a series of the same incident that got to me to the point where I could never even sleep in the upstairs room anymore, ever. My wife and I don't sleep in the same rooms. It's due to our habits. She needs the lights and the TV on, and I need darkness and silence, so we sleep in other rooms. Well, I opted to stay on the couch every night, but for a few nights I had to sleep in my son's room because, We had to get rid of the couch and wait for the new one to arrive. My son had a trundle bed, so I slept on it for those nights. Every night I slept on this thing, I would be falling asleep, and then I would just feel like someone or something would lay down right next to me. I wouldn't see an indention, but as soon as I would look, there would be no one there. I at first thought, well, maybe it's one of the cats we owned, but they were never in the room with us up there. To be honest, the cats just would never come up there in general. And this would happen every night, and when I brought it up one day, my son, who was now 11, told me, yeah, it happens all the time. I used to be afraid, but now I'm used to it. The wife even said she would have this happen when she used to have that room. I did research on the house, however, there was no listed history of a boy living there, or ever dying on the property. The only history of the area was that it used to be mostly trees where we lived, many years ago, and the area was also where a Civil War battle had happened before. Still no mention of the deaths of young children anywhere. To this day, in an odd way, I feel horrible about moving out of that house because being a parent has made me feel as if we left a child there to be lonely, and perhaps that is all it was. This child's spirit was just happy. There were people there, and now he didn't have to feel lonely anymore. Who was this little boy? When I was young, I lived with my parents and older sister in a trailer home on a plot of land behind my grandparents' house, which was no kidding. A large 2-story pink house in Texas, Galveston County to be more exact. Behind these properties was a family with their own business, which was a large U-Haul rental place. The family there was a wife, 2 daughters, and a husband. Now, I won't be naming any names except one, the husband. There was a man named Timothy Gribble. Now, Timmy here was a convicted murderer who strangled and violated 2 women. He was given the death penalty and executed back in 2000. I lived in the trailer up until I was in the 4th grade, and then ended up moving to my grandparents' pink house to house sit, as they moved to a new home for retired people. This is all just to place the setting. Perhaps it will help to bring some understanding as to what I experienced over the years on these properties. Even when I was a kid and moved into the pink house, or even visiting, I always felt off being there, like something was just not right. Nothing really happened though until I was in the 6th or 7th grade. First, it was a weird thing with the front door. It would just open on its own. At first, it would just open slowly and stay open. Easily explainable, right? Door unlocked, old house, town sitting on a fault line, so the foundation wasn't exactly the best. That never really weirded me out, no. What was weird was one night around 8 or 9 p.m., I was just watching TV in the living room, and the door just opened and closed itself quickly. Twice. Didn't creep me out right away because I figured, oh, it's just my cousin. My mother said he was coming by to pick up an inhaler as they both used the same kind. He was known to be a bit of a jokester towards me, so I figured I would see if it was him. I take a look outside and my driveway was empty. I then asked my mother if he had just came in and left, which, of course, she said no. So I tried to put it out of mind and move on. And then there were the nights when I would be left in this large house alone. I would be sitting playing video games in the living room and then hear what sounds like dishes being rattled around in the kitchen. When I would go in there, there would be no one there, nor anything out of place. Sometimes I would be sitting on the computer in the upstairs main area and had music on, and then hear random things fall in my room. I would get up to check, and it would always be something like a pile of CDs that were on a shelf, or some of my old collectible action figures knocked over. It was never anything too crazy, only enough to make you think and even get a little creeped out. Then, there was the faint pounding noise every night. When I would lay down for bed at night, I would hear a faint noise like a hand lightly pounding on the wall or floor. I would hear this every night. I disregarded it since no one else could hear it and figured I was just imagining it. For a while, it did bother and unnerve me. And then I just started to accept that it was never going to go away, and I will just once again move on. I figured if there is something, it's just doing its thing, and as long as it left me alone, I would leave it alone. Then the night I actually saw something I couldn't explain, and to this day, my family swears I just imagined it. It was around 3 a.m. I was in the living room playing a video game on the TV. I got thirsty and decided to go to the kitchen to get a drink, and I look across the room and there was a figure standing there, and I froze. My dining room kitchen is a bit large. I was standing at the entrance next to the staircase, looking across the dining room past the bar into the kitchen, and there was the figure of a woman standing there. She was a slim build, wearing a long nightgown, and well, had no head. There wasn't a bloody stump where the neck was, just there was no head there. As I said, I froze. I wasn't truly scared, just unsure how to react, and just wasn't processing what I was seeing. I turned around and went back in the living room and sat down confused. I kept thinking about it and pondering, did I really see that? Was that real? So, I got up and went back in there. She was still there, never moved, just standing there. I went back in and out several times, and she did not leave. I finally said, okay, you stay there. I don't care, do what you do, and I'm going to my room and going to sleep. No response, not even a wave, nothing. So I went to bed and laid there the rest of the night until 6 a.m., terrified, worrying if she would come up here into my room. Thankfully, that was the last I saw her, but there were other experiences that happened in that house, and even at my old trailer home. A couple weeks after that, we were doing some remodeling work on my room, so I wound up having to sleep a few nights in my parents' room on the floor. As was every night, the faint pounding noise continued. Again, I would ignore it and just sleep, but one night, the noise grew a little louder each time. Though it stayed faint, it would grow slightly louder. I would ask my parents, "Do you hear that?" And they would say, of course, no. They didn't. As it continued, it finally just stopped for a while. It got eerily quiet. I figured it finally got tired. After around 10 or 15 minutes, something slammed into my parents' closed door to the room hard. It sounded like someone just ran and shoulder charged into it. Trust me, it was loud. I sat up and said, okay, I know I was not the only one who heard that. My parents agreed. My father and I checked the whole house, even our attic, which is not a place you really want to go, since the house was so old. Nothing. No one was there, but us. The noise went back to its faint self again, and stayed that way for the rest of the time I lived there. There were other weird things that would happen in the house, nothing too wild to share, but there is a strange one though that a woman I dated used to tell me about. Years later, when my parents built a new house on the old property our old trailer home was on, this woman used to tell me that when she would step outside on the back porch to have a smoke, she would see an old man with a gray beard wearing a suit standing at the back door of that old house. And this was during a time when no one was living in the house, and it was pretty much just falling to age and wear and tear, being that no one was living there to maintain the home. To this day, I still think about this and wonder if the woman I saw and the noises were the same. I often wondered if this person was the victim of that Gripple guy. Some days, I wish I had imagined it all. Besides what all occurred within that old pink house of my younger years, things started to escalate and get weird even when we lived in the trailer home. Many of these troubles started when my mother thought it would be a grand idea to buy a Ouija board. She never saw this thing as anything other than a nonsensical thing and was mostly harmless fun. It was the day this board came into our lives did things get weird. This was mostly before moving into that old house as well. Before I mention further, I suppose I should mention this story involves an old friend of the family, an aunt-in-law named Debbie. We knew her quite well when she was married to my uncle, and even after they divorced, she still remained a good friend of the family. I was very young when she was around, but I did remember her, just little more vaguely than the rest of the family. An unfortunate event happened to her, and she passed away in a vehicular accident. It was a sad time for the family, though it didn't affect me as much, being I was so young at the time that she passed. Back to the story now. When we got this board, my mother would constantly make my sister and I play the thing with her. She never delved into asking questions like who is speaking, is the house haunted, or other weird creepy questions. Mostly just what lottery numbers are going to get drawn, or will this or that happen in the future. Often she would ask, would we ever get rich, or would my sister and I get married? Goofy and slightly innocent questions. And there was one day, though, she had us three playing the game and asked a question neither my sister nor I expected. She asked it, does Debbie ever visit us? This board quickly answered yes, and then since that night, you would hear or even see strange things in the home or around the property. Sometimes it would be the sound of someone walking down the hall at night. Creepy, but still easily debunkable, considering again, the place was always settling, making it not unusual to hear an odd noise here and there. One of the more annoying and strange things would be seeing a person always walking by the screen door, like they were walking from the direction of my grandparents' old house to walk up to our porch. And the way our chair was situated in the living room, you could watch the TV, and if you had the door open and could see out our screen door, you would see this person walking up constantly. It was always from the same direction, and it vaguely looked like a woman with a white ball cap on. From the height of the house, you would see only their head. Then when you would get up expecting someone coming to knock on the door, no one would be there. It got to the point where I would just always keep the main door closed, just so I wouldn't see them anymore, or I would sit on the couch where I couldn't see outside. And then there was the TV's strange flickering on and off issue. Now this didn't happen often, but it would happen at very random times, often late at night. First off, when it first happened, we debunked it quickly. Seemed that TV's manual power switch would stick, and this sometimes could cause it to flip on and off quickly. Scared us a lot at the time, but once we saw what it was, no big deal. Just an old TV with a faulty switch. Pull the switch loose, done and over, right? Well, that didn't stop the TV's random spastic on and off attacks. It would happen in the middle of the night, and when we would inspect it, the switch wasn't stuck like it normally was. It would happen often, and sometimes more than once at night. The TV would just flick on and off quickly for a minute or two and then just stop. Unlike when the switch would stick, it wouldn't stop until you knocked it back loose. It happened so often that we would even make a point to make sure that the switch was not stuck, and yet the TV would still continue on. Just like in my grandparents' house, you never felt alone anymore. It wasn't a hostile feeling, more comforting than anything. Still, didn't make the random things like the TV flickering, or the phantom walking by the door, or footsteps less creepy and unsettling to experience. Now back to that Ouija board, which stayed in my family for all the way up until my 20s. I would say until I was 21. My mother would again still make us use it with her all the time, and eventually, it just got stuffed under her bed and never used again. When I always had an issue with that board, though, was the string of bad luck that would follow almost every time I had it in my possession. It didn't matter what was going on, something negative would happen. If my friends and I were out and about, and had this thing with us, almost every time we would get pulled over by police. Either we would get a ticket for speeding, or other traffic violation, or even they would try to search the car thinking we were up to no good. Other times, someone would fall or just mildly get hurt on accident. Perhaps we would get caught by our parents for sneaking out of the house at night. You know, typical BS teens would do when they hung out and partied on the weekends. I can even recall a few times my girlfriend and I were about to be intimate and someone would damn near walk in on us. It just never failed, no matter what. If that board was so much as in the room, something bad was bound to happen. Years passed by though. I graduated high school. My parents eventually hauled the old trailer off and built a house on the property, and of course, I lived there for a few more years before I went into the military and wound up to where I am today. I met this one woman that I spent close to 3 years with. During the time with this woman, my parents had gotten divorced for a few years. Guess what object stayed with our home when my mother moved out into her own apartment? That's right, the damned Ouija board. Now, the woman I was dating thought it was interesting and fun. Well, she was into all that creepy horror stuff like myself as well. She and I would use it, of course, and had fun asking crazy questions like who was there and whatnot. Then there was a day something talking with the board started to answer questions in really creepy ways. It was her, a couple of her friends, and I hanging out at the house one day. It wasn't unusual for us to have company a lot because my father would work graveyard shifts at his work, then go 4 days off, then 4 days working a day shift. Anyway, her and her friend were using the board while I was just sitting in the room, and the board started to say its name. They asked for a name, and it just quickly spelled out, Andrew. We were like, okay, Andrew, where are you from? It then answered, not even kidding, hell. That is when I just said, maybe we should, I don't know, say goodbye. Of course, they said, nope, let's keep going. They asked if it was a demon. It said, nope. Just a person who managed to escape after they died. How did you die? It said it took themselves. Where are you in the room? In the corner, sitting on the stool. We all stopped and slowly turned our heads to the corner where there was an old stool sitting there, like it always was, and stared at it, like we were expecting to see this entity just sitting there. Why not? Let's just ask more questions. I really was wanting them to stop, but well, that woman often would never listen, or cared what I would ask. Probably why we broke up 2 years later. So why did you come here? I liked it here better. Are you going back? No. Can I stay here? Yes. It asked if they could stay. I was about to say, you best tell that spirit to leave. Then before I could speak, that woman said, sure. As long as you're nice and you don't bother anyone. Of course, I facepalmed. It said okay, and then she ended the session and said goodbye. And that is when things in the house would just move on their own. Nothing thrown or violent, but more of a, hey, I'm still here. Sometimes it would be a book that would just randomly fall off a shelf. Perhaps a picture frame would lift and drop back down. One night, we were in the computer room and we heard a rustling noise. We came in and found all the stools at the bar and other objects just laid on their side. At night, when we would be in bed, sometimes you would see a shadow in the hallway, or a weird red light passing by the door. A friend that had stayed one night slept on the floor while the girlfriend and I were on the bed, and he swears he saw a red light run from the door to the back of the hall into the computer room. Now I know this all sounds crazy, but to further go on, several years later, I am home for my second visit during the holidays from the military with my new wife. And of course, we stayed with my parents that week. I had forgotten about old Andrew and never even mentioned it to the wife, who was a bit more sensitive to these things than me. She told me it was late. She got up and walked into the living room to go to the kitchen, and she said there was a scary-looking old man sitting on the couch. It was translucent and sitting there staring at her. After that, there just was never any other weird things that happened in that house. As for the damn board of bad luck, I gave it to a friend that was into the occult and claimed to be either a Wiccan or a pagan. It was so long ago I don't remember. Hell, I haven't seen that person in over 20 years now. He took the board and said he cleansed it, or something, and disposed of it. Also, shortly after getting rid of it, my mother then asked where it went. I just lied, said that the ex-girlfriend stole it. I know, I'm mean. It's okay. Believe it or not, we are friends now today. Hey, we all grow up, eventually.
Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Perhaps click the bell for notifications, and remember, hell is empty, and the devils are here.